That now means that in this monthly Canadian real estate market update, there's only 2 cities left with home prices under $400,000. Hey there, welcome back. My name is Matthew Pfeifer, real estate agent in Regina, Saskatchewan. That is my trusted assistant, Matilda. This is the monthly Canadian real estate market update here on Bald Prairie Real Estate, where I go city by city using stats, data, trends, and local agent insight to give you all the knowledge you need to know about what's going on in the Canadian real estate market. And I've got some exciting news because this month we've added one brand new city to this month's market update. But of course, we just start off with another one of my terrible bad dad jokes. What do you call a factory that makes okay products? A satisfactory. If you have a terrible joke I can use in a future episode, put it in the comments below. Let's get you up to speed on the Canadian real estate market. First off, congratulations to everyone who correctly predicted that I'd be adding Quebec City to this month's market update. I've been wanting to add a new city, and I know you guys have been asking me to add different cities, and I appreciate all of you that continue to watch. I want to make sure I've got at least 5 years worth of data to work with, and a great real estate agent in that market that I can partner with, learn about the market so I can give you guys that insight that you expect of me in these market updates. Price-wise, Quebec City has to be considered Canada's hottest real estate market right now. Prices have increased about $100,000 in just the last 2 years. That's 31%. Heck, they're up 10% just since the start of this year. And you've got prices that have essentially doubled in the last 5 years. Quebec City has been on a tear for quite a while with really rapidly appreciating prices. Last year in Quebec City, they had just under 10,000 homes that were sold in the year, putting it on par with 2020 and 2021, where they had the most home sales, a little over 10,000 a year. Right now, they are on pace to exceed 10,000 sales and very likely going to see the most number of homes sold ever in a year. And they have half of the inventory that they had in 2020 and 2021. With that lack of inventory and the strong demand in home sales, it shouldn't be shocking at all that they're seeing these crazy 15-16% year-over-year price increases right now. So as a home buyer in Quebec City, you have to understand how competitive the market is, how much multiple offers driving up prices they are seeing right now, and be prepared to compete accordingly. July is usually a month where you see home sales start to slow down a little bit. This year, not at all, as month over month home sales increased. But more shocking, last year in July, we set a record for the most number of homes sold, 380 homes sold a month. This July, 414, so absolutely crushed the previous record. And not only did we see home sales jump 9% versus last year, we also had 9% more inventory last year. Right now, I'm seeing a lot of houses selling 10 or 15% over asking price and very few houses selling under asking price. So as a home buyer in Regina right now, how do you get your offer accepted? Well, you can always offer them way over asking price. That usually works. But I'm also seeing home buyers that are removing inspection conditions from their offers, and some that are even removing their financing condition. Now, I don't believe that most of these buyers have $300,000 to $500,000 just sitting in their bank account. I think they're gambling. They just assume they're going to get their mortgage approved, so they're not making it a condition to their offer to make that offer more competitive. Of course, that has some very serious risks. I did a video earlier this year where a home buyer took that gamble and ended up costing him $300,000 to not buy the seller's home. I'll put a link to that video in the description of this video. Usually in the Saskatoon real estate market, June to July, we see about an 8 to 10% drop in home sales. This year, we saw a 7% increase in home sales. And right now, we're seeing more homes selling every month than there is active inventory in Saskatoon. So that ratio is called the sales to active listing ratio. If it's below 12%, that's considered a buyer's market. Between 12 and 20, balanced market, 20 and above, seller's market. In Saskatoon, it's been above 100 for the last 5 consecutive months. Okay, imagine this for a second. You're thinking about buying a house, so of course, you're watching a great YouTube video teaching you about what's going on in the Canadian real estate market, and you think to yourself, hey, that guy really knows his stuff. I would love it if he could be my realtor. Well, guess what? I can. If you look in the description of this video, you can book me in for a buyer's consultation. I would love to be your agent if you're looking at buying a house in Regina, but if you're somewhere else in Canada, I can set you up with an agent from my vast network across the entire country. Now, let's get back to the video. As we roll into August, this is typically the time of year where that composite benchmark price in Saskatoon starts to soften a little bit. Even last year, when home prices increased rapidly, we still see a fall off in August. So don't be surprised if we see that again this year. But that doesn't mean all of a sudden in August, everybody's gonna be buying houses under asking price in Saskatoon. It does usually mean that we see less competition amongst buyers in August through the back half of the year. If you had to sum up the Winnipeg real estate market in one sentence, this would probably be how I would do it. In a market that has been busy for the last 5 years, right now, Winnipeg is seeing one of the busiest markets it's had in the last 5 years. This July, they had the most homes sold since 2021, the fewest number of new listings since 2021, and outside of 2021, the lowest level of inventory in the last decade. Oh, and don't forget, home prices are at record all-time highs. I'm honestly surprised that the composite benchmark price didn't break through $400,000 this year. Probably won't now because we'll see a little softening in price for the back part of the year. Very likely, if this market continues next year, we'll see it easily exceed $400,000 in the spring. And unfortunately, that now means that in this monthly Canadian real estate market update, there's only 2 cities left with home prices under $400,000, Regina and Winnipeg. When I'm talking with real estate agents in Winnipeg, I'm hearing a lot of the same sentiment and feelings that my buyers are telling me about the Regina real estate market. And that is they're frustrated, they're fed up on losing multiple offers on every single house that they like. They put in an offer and they really have no confidence that offer will actually be accepted. And it is really tough to be a buyer under those conditions. And I completely understand it. Here's what I'm telling my buyers in Regina that have the same kind of market conditions. You put forward the strongest offer you can, make sure you're living within your means, you're not going completely crazy on these offers, and almost always things tend to work out the way they're supposed to. You're going to lose on a couple of houses, but the one you end up getting is almost always better than the ones you didn't get. So just stick to it. Okay, when we're talking the Halifax real estate market, we got to start off talking about the giant elephant in the room, and that is home prices. The average price is down about $40,000 from last month. No, home prices in Halifax didn't drop $40,000. The market isn't all of a sudden crashing in 1 month. This is why I don't like using average price. We've seen this a lot of Halifax where prices swing wildly, $10,000, $20,000 from month to month. Last month in Halifax, over 60% of the homes sold under $600,000, which really skewed that average price down significantly this month. If you've been following my Halifax updates for all, you know that Halifax has kind of got 2 very distinct market trends going on right now. Sub $600,000, very busy market. Over $600,000, much slower. Looking at the stats here, sales to new listing ratio under $600,000, about 90%. When it's over $600,000, well, then it drops to about 65%. Overall, 44% of all the homes sold last month in Halifax sold over asking price, with the majority of that being under the $600,000 price point. So if you are out house shopping right now in Halifax and you are under $600,000, be prepared that it's likely going to be a competitive market. Very possible you're going to see multiple offers and houses selling over asking price. If you're shopping over $600,000, you probably have more leverage in the negotiation than the seller does. You can probably dictate price a little more. Whenever I do these monthly market updates, I always enjoy looking at the data and talking to real estate agents from Victoria and Vancouver and seeing the differences in those markets. Geographically, obviously, Victoria and Vancouver are fairly close, but they all have very different drivers. And it really shows, like I say all the time, that Canadian real estate is hyper-local, and what's happening in one market doesn't necessarily mean that same thing is happening in another market. And while you could say the Victoria real estate market has been busier than Vancouver most of the year, we're starting to see kind of a mixed bag set of signals from the Victoria real estate market that might be indicating things are shifting a little bit. Looking at months of inventory, that increased slightly, showing a market that might be slowing down a little bit, while sales to new listing ratio has continued to actually increase pretty much all year long, indicating a market tightening up. And then you've got sales to active listing ratio, which has continued to drop most of the year, indicating a market slowing down. So like I said, mixed bag here. Here's what's really different about Victoria versus pretty much everywhere else in Canada. Home sales of condominiums are up, yes, up 6% year over year, while sales of single family homes are actually down ever so slightly. Pretty much everywhere else in Canada, that's completely flipped. And if you're looking at home prices, that composite benchmark price has been kind of hovering around that $890,000 for most of the year. It's up 2% year over year and up about 2% since we started the year. Well, has the bubble finally burst in the Edmonton real estate market? We've seen 5 of the first 7 months of the year home sales down year over year. Well, comparing versus last year really isn't a fair comparison, because last year was by far the busiest year for home sales in Edmonton's history, with nothing even really close. They had 29,000 homes that sold last year. The next busiest, 2022, were 24,000 homes sold in the year. To put it into context, so far in 2025, there's been about 17,000 homes sold in Edmonton. That is more homes than were sold in the entire year in 2018, 2019, and 2020 respectively. But without a doubt, home sales and prices are softening in Edmonton. Saying that bubble has burst, that's probably a little bit of a stretch. But we gotta talk about the composite benchmark price in Edmonton, because this is the time of year where typically prices start to soften. And yes, year over year, it's up 5%. Month over month, it's down 3% or $12,000. Double check to make sure I didn't write this down wrong. And I'm not sure if potentially there was an error in the press release that Edmonton put out, because the average and median prices were only down a couple $1,000s. That benchmark just doesn't jive with those stats. I'll update you if there's any sort of revision made. But my prediction in early 2025, when I said the Edmonton real estate market would probably see the largest year-over-year price increases in Canada for any individual city, well, that's looking like it's going to be in jeopardy now. The Ottawa real estate market is obviously very driven by what happens with the federal government. And with the results of the last federal election, it shouldn't come as that much of a surprise the Ottawa real estate market has outperformed the rest of Ontario. But we are starting to see some signs the Ottawa real estate market is actually slowing down, not tightening up. Months of inventory saw a slight increase. Sales to new listing ratio saw a slight decrease. Sales to active listing ratio also decreased. All of those point to a market that's slowing down, not one that's tightening up. We even saw a very, very small month-over-month price decrease when it comes to that composite benchmark. And yes, some of this is absolutely season driven. This is the time of year where things slow down in the Ottawa real estate market. But even if you compare how things are right now versus to where they were at this point last year, we're seeing a slower market right now than we did last year. The only thing that's still increasing right now is home prices. When you're comparing the Ottawa to Toronto real estate market, it's very obvious the impact the federal government has on Ottawa. And there has been talks about reducing the size of the federal government. Not much has happened yet in that front. If we see those cuts happen in the city of Ottawa, then we'll likely see a slowdown in the Ottawa real estate market. If it's spread across the entire federal government and not concentrated in Ottawa, probably have much less of an impact on the auto market as a whole. Was this the worst July for home sales in Calgary ever? No, not even close. The slowest since July 2020 though. Does that mean home buyers have completely disappeared from the Calgary real estate market? Also not true. Just we now see supply is outpacing demand for the first time in basically the last 5 years. Much like I say there isn't a Canadian real estate market, it's also kind of inaccurate to say the Calgary real estate market as a whole, because within the Calgary real estate market, you've got different property types, different price points, different neighborhoods, etc., all doing different things. Semi-detached homes, those are increasing in price, even though overall prices in Calgary are declining. And if you look at the apartment style condos, those are down 5% year over year. The Toronto and Vancouver investors that flooded the Calgary real estate market are finding out it's maybe not the gold rush they thought it was. Another thing I wrote down from my notes when I was talking with agents in Calgary is that their luxury market is off to a very hot start, with prices still increasing as well. Speaking of prices, when you look at the composite benchmark price, it is now lower today than it was where we started the year back in January. And that, I think, is something we can continue to expect to see. I expect prices will continue to decline in Calgary. Those 2024 highs, they're not coming back anytime soon. But also the 2020 lows probably aren't coming back either. The market's going to find balance somewhere in the middle. When I was talking with real estate agents about the Montreal real estate market this past month, they said the spring market basically just rolled right into summer. Things have been very busy, and the stats back that up. For home sales, this was the busiest July since 2021, and it was only slightly behind that month. It seems that most homes priced under $1.5 million are seeing a lot of activity, and especially single family homes under $1 million. That's where they're seeing typically 2 to 5 offers on properties, and about 30% of those selling over asking price. But we are seeing inventory increase, although there was a month-over-month decline. That's typical this time of year, but this increase in inventory is mostly what agents are calling speculative sellers that are putting houses on the market for a higher price to see if a buyer will bite on it. And for the most part, that doesn't seem to be working for those sellers. And we're looking at home prices, that composite benchmark price, $575,000. That's up 8% year over year. Montreal has had some of the largest year-over-year price increases in all of Canada this year. I'm sure by now you have seen the headlines. Home sales in Toronto are up 11% year over year. That Toronto real estate market is back, baby.
Officially turned around, guys. We are back, baby. We are fucking back. We're back.
I'd say, whoa, not so fast just yet. There are some data points that we're going to look at here that might be showing some signs of some stabilization in the Toronto real estate market. So let's dive into them. The sales to new listing ratio is a really good kind of early benchmark to watch, because as the market shifts, typically that is the first one to start changing direction. So if sales start outpacing new listings, Well, of course, you'll see active inventory start to tighten up as well. So as that increases, it shows a market that's tightening up a little bit. We've had 2 months in a row in Toronto now that has shifted towards a tighter market. And right now, the sales and listing ratio is now the highest it's been all year. It's higher than at any point last year. Looking at the sales to active listing ratio, that has been around 20% basically all year long. When you're looking at that metric and also the sales to new listing ratio, the higher the number is, the more the market has tightened up. When I look at the months of inventory metric, as I often do in this channel, that has actually been tightening since March. So we do have these little nuggets and data points to keep an eye on. Very early signs right now. I would say it's probably easier to make the argument that we are seeing signs that the real estate market is stabilizing in Toronto, easier than it is to say the market is getting worse in Toronto right now. But again, still very early, only a couple of months for data points here. I'll be watching these trends to see which direction they end up going and keeping you guys up to date. When we're looking at home prices in Toronto, of course, the other big headline you're gonna see with that big month sales is home prices are down about 5.5%. And of course, everybody is talking about the Toronto condo market dragging down the rest of the market. And that is true. Condo prices are down 10%. Townhouses are down about 7%. And single family homes are still decreasing. They're down a little under 5%, so they just barely outperformed the overall market. And right now it's taking about 20 to 25% longer to sell properties on average in Toronto than it did last year. Last month, I said we might be seeing some early signs of the Vancouver real estate market starting to recover. And of course, not everybody agreed with me, and that's okay. I always enjoy the discussion in the comments section. This month, we've got even more data pointing that direction. Let's start with home sales. Those are still well below long-term averages, and it was the second worst July that Vancouver's had in the last decade. But June also hasn't happened in the last decade, an increase in sales from June to July. Until this year, that's exactly what just happened. But we've got more data points that we can look at here. If you compare the sales to new listing ratio, pretty self-explanatory, how many sales versus how many new listings have come on the market, that has now increased 3 months in a row, showing a market that's picking up a little bit of activity. Then if you look at the sales to active listing ratio, again, sales versus how many houses are currently in the market right now, that also saw an increase this past month. And for the first time since February, months of inventory actually shrunk this month. Like I said last month, does that mean I think that Vancouver prices are gonna shoot through the roof? No, I still don't think that. But sales activity typically leads what happens with prices. And at least if sales activity continues to pick up a little bit, it is going to put potentially a bottom on the floor for prices in Vancouver. I don't think we'll see rising prices just yet, but I do think the Vancouver real estate market, at least at this point, looks like it might continue to tick up just a little bit through the balance of the year.